How should we do this, Sophie? I think
Yeah, we're on. Do you want me to start singing, perhaps?
yes.
Interrupt me whenever you want. Do you want to know anything about what I'm singing?
You sent me the text right before we started, but
Mm-hmm.
I will warn you in advance that I won't be able to, I would have to sort of visually or just by reference to the text tell you what part of it, because I can't sing and I won't be able to replicate any of the
That's
notes.
fine. I don't expect you to.
Sure.
Do you want to know the context at all, or shall I just go for it?
Let's just go for it.
Okay. Noble Seigneur, salut. Noble Seigneur, salut. Seigneur. Salut. Une sage dont les lois s'élèveront, m'a chargé de ces messages. Chevalier, chevalier, allez-vous sans couronne, honneur ici, aux gentilshommes qu'elle a choisis, qu'elle a choisis. Vous pouvez croire que nul seigneur n'eut tant de gloire ni de bonheur. Tant de gloire, tant de gloire, de bonheur. Non, jamais. Non, 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 jamais. Ne croyez pas ce chevalier dans mes espoirs. Or, salut, que Dieu protège, que Dieu protège vos amours, vos amours. Or, salut, chevalier, Dieu protège.
Sophie, who is singing?
This is a page, a Catholic page. So we are in the midst of the War of the Huguenots, or just before it, rather. The opera is going to culminate in the St. Bartholomew Day massacre of the Protestants by the French Catholics. And I am Urbain, the page of Marguerite de Valois, the kind of Catholic heiress, who is looking for her Protestant suitor, Raoul, and is going to lead him to her, to his queen. And this is all we're still in the diplomatic process prior to the massacre. We're all still trying to see if marriages can be arranged so that everybody starts to get along politically. It won't work, unfortunately, but so basically it's a noble seigneur, salut, my dear lords, hello. It's a show-off aria, essentially. All of that it amounts to really is, hello, I'm here, I'm looking for one of you. He's lucky that my lady is interested in him.
Now, this page is a boy or a girl?
It's a boy.
How young of a boy?
He would be something like 16, 17. He's young man. He is not going yet to be married. So I don't think it's specified in the opera, but he would be typically a late teenager.
And does he have any other lines or any other function in the song?
He doesn't do terribly much more. He exists a little bit otherwise, but he mostly exists to come on and talk a little bit, be one of it. It's a very, very large cast because it is an opéra lyrique, so huge chorus, etc. He doesn't have much of an internal life. He doesn't have much of an arc otherwise.
Is that how you're playing him? Somebody who doesn't have much of an internal arc? If you were me and you were watching yourself play this singing this as you did, would you say the character that just came through does not have much of an internal life? That
ideally not. Ideally, he should feel very proud of himself.
I don't mean ideally. I mean as you just did it.
I can't know. What am I thinking about? I think I am being graceful and eloquent and poetic. I conceive of myself as a young but still sensitive young man. I am proud that I have learned good sword fighting and such things. I'm mostly just extremely proud to be representing my lady. I am a little bit brash. I am very showy in a way that isn't so overtly aggressive, but instead I'm going to do it with a lot of flourish.
And what about all the smiling? You're smiling at the audience. Mm-hmm. What is that about?
I want them to like me. I want them to know that I'm here, that it's an audience piece. I am talking to an audience. I am trying to woo them and also trying to represent the queen. I am her emissary, so I represent kind of her goodwill as well. And I'm a safe emissary.
Yeah. Now, I'm gonna just say a few things about, and you tell me what doesn't land. I'm just gonna give you your words back. But let's say it's not about the page, and it's got something to do with either this opera or your relationship to music. That you're proud. You, not the page. As you come on, you're sensitive. You're good at sword fighting, but let's just say you got the technique,
Mhm.
you got the accoutrement of the work. Proud and brash, but also that you think of yourself as a representative of the queen. Not much of a role other than to be a representative of this person
Mhm.
and to play it safe.
Yes.
And let's say that person, the queen, is music.
Mhm.
Does that land?
Yeah,
You're
absolutely.
you're playing it safe as a musician,
I
and
think
you.
so. I think so, sometimes. I mean, I think it calques very well to who I am in a lot of ways. I am assured, and relatively proud most of the time, but also I am not trying to be disliked. I am not, I am overtly, specifically trying to be liked most of the time, especially with this sort of opera aria, because this is exactly the kind of aria that I will do at the beginning of an audition or during a donor event or something. Just it's a very hello, please love me, please give money to this, please hire me. Look how open I am. So I think it tracks very well. I'm representing some sort of larger ideal. I am proud of it. And I am to a certain extent subsuming myself to it. I think this kind of calques quite well to who I am.
You like this?
Do I like your description or do I like the fact that it calques to me?
The fact.
Yes, actually.
Okay. Do you want to try anything else?
Anything else music wise or a different piece or
No, no. A
this
different thing, different way of being.
of being? Yeah. Yeah, of course. Why not? Um, do you want to give me something or shall I just try something?
Well, let's figure something out about this boy and do it a different way, and we'll try to forget that this is about you and music, but I'll keep track. And let's say, so you're a 16-year-old boy. Is the queen pretty?
Yes.
Okay. What else might be going on between you and the queen? In your head. I'm not nothing on towards,
No, but I
but
think it's entirely likely that we've got some sort of Carabino situation, maybe not overtly like a Carabino Contessa situation, but I probably have a crush on her. I think that is very likely. She's powerful. She's not old herself.
right. She's probably actually in the same
Yeah, she's
young nubile age as you.
young. Yeah.
And in that case, how do you feel about standing in front of a bunch of people? How do you feel towards these lords?
Mhm.
What do you think of them?
I think I am above them because I have the queen's ear.
This is how you feel towards the donors too.
Yeah, a little bit. Sure, why not?
Okay.
Because I have the ability of music. Ideally not, but yeah,
No,
sometimes.
I don't think we care about the idea.
I care too much about the ideal, perhaps.
I think so, and I think this is what we might be dealing with. So let's break it a little bit. So you actually don't like those
Sure.
people. You're above them. Um, you like the lady,
Hmm.
kind of very naturally in love with her. You have no shot, and then they have sent you out to come in and say, this woman that you're in love with
Hmm.
is going to take one of these
Hmm.
uh, douchebags or whatever they are, like one of these Wall Street
Yeah.
bros, to basically. Um, Do you know how to read and write as the page?
Yes.
Okay, so you know how to read and write. So you have also read some French poetry from that period, and you know some of the romances, etc. So this is like 1540s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can we do this now?
Yeah.
And you know, if you can go back as you're doing this, keep in mind that that you are not a representative of the Queen, but somebody who's being used.
Okay. Sure. Noble Seigneur, salut. Noble Seigneur, salut. Seigneur. Salut.
Sorry. Right now, as you were, and this is no, I have no way of describing it, as you were doing that long note that for which you had to strain.
Mm-hmm.
What were you going through as you were doing that?
Let me show you how strong I am. Let me show you how much I can do.
And how are you feeling as you were doing it with your voice? It's a in terms of like what was going on in your mind, because you have this different kind of character to play.
Having fun. Basically, trying to tap into a different fun. The fun of my usual interpretation is more just, isn't it fun to share music together? Aren't these sort of very silly fiorituras just delightful to jump around in? This, but I hope you like them. This is still, I'm having fun with my sort of doodles, but I don't really care if you're listening. There's a bit more relishing, sort of selfish relishing.
Yeah, that's not what the boy we said is going through. That's
Oh,
that's
no.
that's more of you interfering. It's sort of the page as the function of the page.
You think so?
Well, I mean, let's go back through it again. The boy
Oh.
comes in. He's in love with the Queen, who we know is music,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the moment where, you know, where he's really going to. It's probably one of the worst things he has ever done in his life.
Okay.
I don't imagine he's having fun telling people like.
Okay. I was taking it as he's having fun showing how superior it is. So you want a lot more pathos, basically,
I
in
don't
his task.
I don't know if about pathos, but I like I mean, it makes sense. So superiority is something we discussed. He's going to be
Yeah.
superior. We know that he's going to be superior. But fun, I think, is can be cut the fun out.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think like the fun, I can imagine him at some point like going into the fun. It's a tremendous defense mechanism
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for the emissary to to withstand what is happening.
Mm-hmm.
But can we do it differently?
Yeah. Sure. Well,
Can
probably.
can you do it differently?
Yes.
How are
Probably.
you so happy? No, well, can you? Well, let's look at it differently. Say to me, no, I cannot do it, or like I have a problem with doing it, and let's see what that's about.
Yeah. I don't think I can. Well, actually, I think I can. That's the problem, though. I think I can. I think it's going to be difficult, though, because I'm used to enjoying those. I'm used to sort of enjoying the feeling in the voice, the freedom. Shall I try it again? Or would you like to?
So you're going to lose something of your freedom as this is happening.
I might. There's freedom in many emotions. Freedom does not have to come with enjoyment, especially when it's a vocalism. There's a great amount of freedom in a weep, for instance. So I could still have, especially technically, of course, I do want to have freedom, just vocally, but it doesn't have to be a relish of how delightful vocalism can be. It could be a repetition, it can be a plea, it can be a cry. I think I'm going to try one of those instead.
Let's see what comes up. Great.
Noble Seigneur, salut. Noble Seigneur, salut. Seigneur, salut.
Wait. Where? Tell me what was going on.
I'm taking it very literally in a lot of ways. The text, every praise that I have of this woman that I love is not just a sales pitch. It is a little bit of a dagger because she's so wonderful. She's any one of you would be so fucking lucky to have her. You don't even realize how wonderful she is. So there's a sort of disdain of all of these people. And at the same time, a lot of sweetness for just even the poetry of the words. There is now a relishing, but it's a relishing of sadness, of not the overt, but instead that kings would be jealous of, that I'm jealous of. It's it's the description of the lost lover.
And how did you feel, or what were the mental sort of thoughts that were going through your head, meta
Mhm.
meta to this, meaning about yourself in that position doing that?
Uh, Basically, to strip what I know of my my decision, my previous decisions of the character, and just to take it for face value on the page.
How do you
To
feel, how do you feel about that?
It's fun also. Basically, it's a wonderful um, kind of perversion, and I play a lot of young men as a mezzo, as a tall mezzo. I play a lot of young men who are on some sort of spectrum of very, very chipper to not so chipper, but at the same time, all of them all of them have some sort of darkness, at the same, because they are always representing somebody that they can't have, or they have a crush on somebody who's going to end up with the tenor, and they usually get killed, maybe even tortured.
Yeah.
So to remove the artifice of what is normal, what is expected of court, what is the youth even, and just take what's on the page as what's on the page. So noble seigneur salut, sure, that can be happy or sad. It could just be, hello, I salute you. It doesn't have to be, hello, welcome to my show. And then after that, une dame noble et sage, there's nothing inherently about that text that means that I have to be a court jester, a lovely court jester.
Are,
That could be a tragic romance.
are you giving me the ideal in terms of when I said how did you feel? You said it can also be good, but the part about the loss of what you came in with,
Mm-hmm.
the loss of like these decisions that you have come in with and what you're used to, that I didn't hear. I'm not. Was there no loss at all?
Oh, you mean, is there a sort of mourning of what I've lost?
I have no idea. We can get to it a different way. Who am I? Who am I reminding you of in your sort of life in music? Is it the
Most typically a repetiteur.
what is the repetitor's job?
To make somebody rehearse. So a coach or a repetiteur, because you're focusing more on text than technique. But honestly, it could be anybody. What I'm essentially reminded of is when you come to somebody with, sort of a very packaged thing. Incidentally, this happens, you're working more on text and interpretation, but it could be the drama coach. It could honestly be the new voice teacher you've never worked for. We just have to pretend that all of it, you're talking about tone color or something. It doesn't really, really matter. But what I'm reminded of in this situation is very, very much, this is what I've been working on. This is how I think of something. And then somebody telling me, you haven't got it. You don't actually understand this character, or you don't know how to approach high notes or low notes. It doesn't really, really matter. But yeah, that's the situation I'm reminded of.
Who's the scariest person in your field who can tell you that? Not, I don't mean as a specific individual, as a role.
Mm-hmm. Probably a conductor. Well, no, it could really be anybody at this stage, because I'm not looking for a teacher. It could very much be a teacher, but I have a teacher that I really like. However, if you're trying to kind of audition for a teacher, that can be a really, really fraught moment of, please think that I'm good enough that you can work with me, but also have the right kind of problems that you want to fix.
Is that what's happening between us? Is that the power relations that's happening between us?
Not really.
The way
You said that I'm not, or I think if I understand you correctly, that I'm not, that I don't seem to have a loss of my interpretation, and because I really don't mind. I don't think I will forevermore sing this as a tragic lament. But first of all, I lose nothing in doing it. And second of all, I might actually like bringing more of that into it, just even secretly. I'm thinking of tone color. So I'm not afraid of you that much, actually, I think.
I don't feel that I'm causing fear.
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling, and as you were singing, I felt like I was causing compliance. And
Yes.
was
Yeah.
reminded very much of sort of those donors who and what they expect of you, which is what they expect of you is probably to be cheery and
Mm-hmm.
you know, or whatever it was. And in this case, they had just one of the donors had opened his mouth.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Compliance is absolutely the thing. And in that case, you're, rather than being like a donor, you're much more like a director, because and anybody, a coach, a director, a voice teacher, the assumption is come really prepared. So the difference between coming to the first day of opera rehearsal and the first day of a play, excuse me, is that usually you come not knowing the material for a play and you do readings together and you sort of build something. There's no time for that. So you're expected to come to the first day of rehearsals having already memorized everything, having already coached everything, and you coach every note to within an inch of its life. It's so prescribed. However, you're also, with the compliance, you're also expected to have the egolessness to say, oh, all of a sudden, you think that Urbain is actually a 97-year-old woman who actually raised Marguerite? Okay, well, I have to try it. Why not?
Okay, then let's do it differently, because I don't think we're gonna get at this through either compliance or because it's we're trying to see how you would do this, how you would do it. If you were to do it again the way you wanted to do it, not the way the donors expected, not the way the tradition expects it, not the way
Just, yeah, I'm practicing it by myself. I'm enjoying the music, perhaps, or
performing it. I don't know what gets to you. I don't know what does it for you. I mean, you're going to enjoyment, but it seemed like that time, the first time you went to enjoyment as a way of a little bit distancing it. So can we get the male like gaze? And I don't mean the male homosexuals. I mean, like, can we? Where are you, Timmy? Are you on camera? Can you spotlight David Dixon and yourself as well? You do it, or I'll do it for you.
yeah, you can do it.
Okay, thank you. Can you spotlight yourselves, or I can do it here? Oh, there you go. Add a spotlight. Okay, so here's sort of like not the gallery of the directors, but the gallery of the asshole, sort of like of these, of however it is that this page feels towards the lords, and however it is that Sophie feels towards the donors. Um, and the directors who think that so and so is a 90-year-old woman, and they think that they are right, etc. But you are an emissary of the queen. You're an emissary of the queen with whom you are in love. And otherwise, it's music. And please, I know this is counterfactual, is that I'm commanding you to do this, but the only command is stop yourself when you feel like you're not happy.
Mm-hmm.
And pause and take as much time as you want and go back to the beginning. And I won't say anything for the rest of the 5 minutes or 7 minutes that we have together in this. Just remember, we are those damn lords. Like we are.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to. You don't. You might have to make us like you, but you do not have to internalize us.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see how that goes.
And I am myself predominantly, right? I am doing what I want to do.
You're performing this in a manner that will work for you, in a manner that will represent your relationship. As all I can say is that you're an emissary of the queen. That's all I know. I have nothing else to, because I don't know how this should be done. So all I can say is what you told me. Mm-hmm. You're an emissary of the queen, and you are superior to these guys to whom you're presenting your queen.
Okay. Yes, let's see if I can.
Yeah, stop yourself whenever you go in. If it doesn't work, stop yourself and come. Go from.
Do you want? Shall I go from the beginning?
From anywhere you want, but if you stop yourself, go back to where you started and give yourself time to do it.
Can I mute myself?
Yeah, mute yourself.
I'm fine with it. No. Noble Seigneur, salut. Noble Seigneur, salut. Seigneur.
mean,
Yes.
we are at time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you don't want to say anything else, Houman, or Sophie, before we switch over?
What are we switching over to?
Great question.
Well, I think it's maybe actually how this just ended with Sophie. Maybe a segue into something. I have a lot of things that I'd love to ask the both of you.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll keep mine as brief as I can, so I can also open it up for others, and also just sort of flatten this grid of the four of us to everybody else that's here. But I guess maybe starting with, I wanted to hear a little bit about what that felt like, beyond what I felt in watching what that seemed to feel like.
Mm-hmm.
But Sophie, I know that we've spoken a little bit about, in the context of opera, what a setup like this would be, far from, but also closely emblematic of like the idea of a masterclass, and how that is a part of that world, and how it functions as a part of that world. And I really, the only moment I really thought about it was just in the fact that we just ended with you performing.
Mm-hmm.
And at least from the ones that I've seen, I feel like that's, there's like the celebration at the end of like success.
Yeah, and we had talked about that, the sort of artificiality of the masterclass, where you do a version, and that's sort of what I was talking about before when you asked me, Houman, about the role that you represent in a lot of ways. In my approach to this, to you, there is very much the typical three-part structure of the masterclass. Young, ideally gifted singer performs, does a good job, but not good enough to be perfect. Master teacher brings up completely new, mind-blowing things. Young singer fixes something technical, interpretive, and then all of a sudden shines in a new facet is broken forth for herself, as well as for the audience, who gets to see both the brilliance of the singer, who is able to pick up something very quickly, the ingenuity of the singer, and of course the great skill of the master teacher. There's sort of always this tripartite structure.
In a way, it's a place for the teacher to show, who's also a trained singer, to show their aesthetic through their teaching.
Yes, that's true.
But there's also, maybe just for Houman's sake also, and others, I wonder if you could describe, because in opera there's a very particular relationship to these two terms, voice teacher and coach, which have from what I understand it, where Houman ended up was kind of maybe a little bit more similar to what the coach might.
I think so, and it's a very blurry distinction. Typically, there seems to be more of an adherence, a sort of sycophantic adherence sometimes, to your teacher. Your teacher is your priest in a lot of ways, is your the person who is leading you down this path of righteousness, and in the worst of sort of compromised situations, this sort of parental figure in a way that can be very, very toxic. Whereas a coach is more, well, a little bit outside of you. There is an expectation that you're going to have one teacher at any given time, and maybe for your entire life, and you represent their work. You are really their child in a lot of ways, because you are continuing a certain legacy. We talk about the teachers of our teachers. Oh, I'm working with such and such, and they were trained by such and such. So there's a descendance of skill. There is the passing on of a specific kind of approach to singing, whereas the coach does tend to do things that are more interpretive as opposed to the instrument, and there's more freedom by virtue of that, and also more independence. Again, plenty of coaches also end up having a very, very strict, this must be done how I want it to be done. But there's a lot more, especially with a good coach, a very intelligent coach. They might know that, okay, you need to do this slower, you're really too loud here. This is just not how it's done. It hasn't been done like this since 1790. But they will have a discussion with you. There's a lot less hegemony in the process of working with coaches. And again, assuming good coaches.
And what, so in that way, Houman kind of took on this role of, I mean, I was sort of surprised that Houman fell in this place of trying to find almost a place of shared empathy between the two of you at the beginning, of saying, okay, here's this, like, what's the story behind this? What's this, like, because maybe he sort of gravitated to the content. So it sounds like that would be, in some ways, more a kind of coach.
Very often, yes.
How did that, go ahead, Sophie.
Because a teacher will probably also talk about this, but there's so many things to talk about on a technical level. And again, it depends how prepared you are, how competent you are, because maybe with a teacher, you're not dealing at all with character, because you're literally trying to make sure you don't break on the high C. Mm-hmm. Or you're just trying to clean up so that and you're just doing this for 45 minutes. So what you can focus on, the aspect of interpretation or of communication, you could either go from a more virtual or a more textual, a more actual, a more physical, etc.
Then, so you brought up a word, competence. In knowing, maybe this would be a kind of a way of moving a little bit forward. How does it feel, or how did it feel for you to be in a scenario where you knew the person that was teaching or coaching or whatever, not even knowing what those roles exactly are, except for this sort of vague teaching idea, mm-hmm. was incompetent to the material that you're working with, both on a technical level and maybe also on a coaching level, in a certain sense, in terms of knowing the repertoire, knowing even who Cherubino is, or
Damn it. I'm making these assumptions. Just yet another young boy, he's younger. And he impregnates his lady, so. Actually, differently scary, because you don't have that common language, because you cannot expect to elide those things that don't need to be spoken anymore, because there is not, yes, well, you need to make sure that you are lengthening that, because then it's going to really show off the bloom of your voice. The entire purpose of this aria is to get hired, because you can show off the fact that you can go high, or the fact that you have a nice lyrical voice. Or again, the same thing, for the opera itself. Just not being able to, what's the word? Rely on this common assumption of this is the basic movement of a page boy. So it's actually quite terrifying to sing for people who aren't in a certain world because they're ruthless. They can't help but be. One of the best things that I had to do was to sing for children one of the hardest mezzo-soprano Rossini arias over and over on early mornings, because they do not care that it's really, really hard and it goes really, really high and it goes really, really fast. And they don't care about anything other than, do I understand that you are grateful and happy? Am I interested in you? They're not going to be interested because, oh, she did such an interesting little bit of coloratura there. So especially if there is any sort of character, any sort of word of interpretation and of meaning, it can be really, really daunting to sing for perceptive people who don't know that they're supposed to perceive specific cliches.
Or even knowing the way that they should, the way that the context in which to perceive your singing. I mean, for me, and I want to pass it over to Houman. For me, there were these moments, especially at the end when Houman put out both mine and his video, where I doubt that you realize this, Sophie, but on the audio, I think probably for everybody, there's this sort of cracking readjustment that Zoom does when somebody goes very, very loud. It makes it sound like you're very far away, and it sort of put you in a room alone in a really beautiful way, I think, to me. But it made me think a little bit more about what presumptions of trust you need for somebody to teach you. How does if you're not in the same space, you're in different rooms, what's the difference of performing when you trust the person that's teaching you versus not even being able to know the purposiveness of why you're being taught in the first place. So if you want to respond to that, that's great. But or Houman, if you want to say a little bit about how you felt doing this and trying to find your own way.
I think I will know ultimately how I felt if I ask I have to ask a question because that last part was when you were pausing for a long period. Now I have to tell you that if you were going to the beginning, I would not the very, very beginning, but if you were repeating a phrase, I would not be able to, my musical memory would not allow me to understand that this has been repeated. What was happening when you were in those pauses?
I was pausing because I didn't know what I'd done. Because I had not been either thinking or not thinking. I had been in that in between where you're just self-conscious. Sometimes I was overtly thinking, I was thinking of something, I was trying something, and then sometimes I wasn't at all. I was simply existing in music, and I was stopping when I was in the cracks of neither having a particular, not to get too dualistic, but not either an opinion or an embodiment, when I was sort of raplapla in between. And yeah, when I was confused, especially because I was grappling throughout with trying to figure out what the prompt meant. And I still haven't figured it out. What it means to be, to a certain extent, doing the aria with a different conception, so with a specific different conception than what I want because I'm used to it a certain way. So what my stereotype of it has become, or even what I know it is supposed to be to a certain extent. But also serving myself more. Actually sort of the somewhat contradictory roles of being a person to put things into motion and a palette, which don't have to be two opposite sides of the spectrum, don't have to be two different roles, but it's very easy in everything. But I think especially in performing arts, especially if you're younger, or not established, especially if you're a woman, to think that you can either exist as yourself or you can follow someone and listen to them, be receptive, that you cannot have this dynamic interchange of really exerting your personality while also being receptive or even seeming to be receptive. And so I was, the two sides of the kind of the cloud of prompts in a lot of ways seemed contradictory to me. And so I was kind of grappling with how much to go in one way or the other.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, this is why you the description of who is a coach, who's a teacher, like this one deals with lineage and is more priestly and dangerous and parental, and the other one. But I'm not, and I realized that you weren't denigrating the coach and denigrating the teacher and valorizing the coach, or vice versa. But at some point, as we were working, I occurred to me that I've made every mistake, and that I've also fallen into some kind of power dynamic that I didn't understand, and I tried to talk about it as clearly as I could. I'm not trying to say power dynamics are bad. It was just a dynamic that I had no idea, and I had walked right into it and created it with like that too early push towards sort of the interiority of the character. It took me, I should have been a little bit smarter. I should have realized that there is a director or a coach or somebody who tells an actor, no, go ahead and play it like this. Like, what we really want here is a gangster from like 15th century I hadn't realized that. I had realized it, but not well enough. And so I ended up playing that part way too well.
I wonder if it's just inherent, though, in listening and not necessarily being able to communicate in exactly the same language. I'm giving you a finished product in some ways, and you're giving me your interpretation of it, maybe some ideas on it, and then I respond to it. But because we are, well, literally, one of us in French, one of us in English, but even just one of us not quite as ourselves, maybe you're also not fully yourself. Maybe that's also why you slip into a director or coach or teacher position. How direct the kind of more balanced communication of ideas can be when it is change something about a work, or even just consider changing something about a work, because there kind of immediately a deference to your idea, even if it is of my own volition, and even if I like it. If I'm changing something that I've crafted for, in this case, years, isn't there just sort of an automatic assumption of your right to change what I've done?
Yes. And I would have been okay with that if that had been my purpose, of course. But my purpose wasn't to give you another interpretation of what was going on. The purpose was to figure out what you want in some sense, and so, or have you come up with something else. But I think what happened, and to say this like most honestly, was that I fell into the trap of the traditional kind of teacher and director and board member and donor much earlier than I would have imagined. I would have guessed, because I came in. You, from my perspective, of course, you sang, and I found myself in a place of having lost a little bit of faith.
Faith in what?
I was asking you a question, and you gave me sort of the ideal answer. And instead of me like digging in a little bit, as soon as I got the answer, it triggered in me all the relationships I have with people who try to give me the right answer, the answer that I want to hear.
What about my answer is the ideal answer? Is it because it's correct? It's the factual information. Here is, this piece was written in such and such a year. It represents this. Is that the ideal, or is the ideal that I've done my research, that I have an answer at all, or that I'm interested? What is ideal?
No, the ideal part was where sort of like the positive is like, yes, we can try this, and it's going to be different, and it's going to be. So there was some element of that.
Okay.
But I'm wondering if there wasn't something, even if I were looking at the history, isn't there something like deeper that makes me, in a completely illegitimate way, so faithless that I would go very quickly for a more violent method, which would be, and that doesn't have anything to do with you. Maybe it does, but it has a lot to do. It must have something to do with you, and something to do with me.
Yeah.
That I would go for a method, for a tool that was so sharp, which was to say, this is who you are in music. Like this represents you in some way. And from that point on, the level of authority I had, I imagine like you either had to fight me or really trust me, or just obey and go with it. And all of those things, since all of those desires were apparent, where I was feeling them in myself, I imagine maybe something of that was, I don't really know what was going on for you in that moment where I said, I rarely get to ask somebody who I'm working with, at that moment when I said, this is you in music, like is this who you are, like does this land for you? What was going on? What did you experience?
Yes, actually, absolutely. I remember quite clearly, because it's a simultaneous panic of being clocked, and feeling very vulnerable as a result, because I agree with you. So feeling so very transparent, but also a pleasure in that, because is it bad that it's me in music? Also, if I'm making music, isn't it kind of phenomenal that I look like myself making music? So a simultaneous like a frisson of recognition of, oh yes, absolutely, this person that I've known for approximately 15 minutes got it, got how simultaneously proud and hungry I am. And then also, oh shit, it only took probably 2.5 minutes for somebody to see how simultaneously proud and hungry I am. So there's I mean, it's freeing to realize that you can't hide, especially if you've decided that you're not going to hide. And also, I mean, it's terrifying that you can't.
Before we open it up on that, Sophie, was there a particular moment that you trusted Houman? And is it right to assume that there was a feeling of some kind of distrust, and where did that come from initially?
I think trust and distrust throughout. Trust even prior to opening up the Zoom link, just by virtue of, this is what I'm doing. The worst that can, I mean, I told you earlier today, the worst that can happen is I sound bad and I don't learn anything, and it won't kill me. So I may as well trust myself and trust this other person, to even just trust them to make me hate this experience. And so I was always in a position of trust and also distrust, knowing I won't be able to hide behind the artifice of assumption. I won't be able to, based immediately on even just watching you watch me, and then especially when I actually started focusing on you afterwards, the thinking, the thinking eyes, a certain distrust of what non-operatic thing is he going to coalesce upon, instead of just liking me. How is he going to perceive something that I can't hide? Which is sort of simultaneous. Well, I don't know if it's distrust, but it's fear, certainly. Yeah, more than distrust, sort of fear in that sense. And then throughout, distrust certainly in my final set of thought processes for interpretation, because I still don't know. I do not know how it all comes together. So there is absolutely an amount of distrust where I don't know where to let go, in what way to dive, in what way not to, because I don't completely understand.
I have to stop. Well, I'm going to say something, but you don't have to respond, because I want to open it up, which is just that part of what you're saying, Sophie, and what you're both talking about, and I think what Houman sort of gravitated to in trying to find this sort of commonplace understanding of, oh, we can talk about story, is that,
oh, that was so bad,
that innate to opera is, at least to my limited knowledge also, is not, for an opera singer, maybe not ever knowing what context, what language somebody is hearing you in.
Yes.
Are they hearing you musically? Are they hearing you in a language that they know? Are they hearing you and reading, a subscript of the story?
Yeah.
I think it's really wonderful to are weird to think about the sort of the simultaneity of languages that one seeks to be understood in order for trust to happen.
Mm-hmm.
In a funny way.
I gave up on trying to turn on a lamp. You're wondering about my.
That's yet another language, and one we're certainly bound to at the moment. Maybe we can just open it up. I want to keep to time for everybody. But if there's anybody else that wants to ask anything or say anything, absolutely should. I think I'm going to, Houman or Sophie, you can also probably help me do this. I'll flatten our grid of all of us so that there's a little less privilege for the 4 screens that we're on. Mm-hmm. And just in the next couple of minutes, if anybody has something that they want to contribute. Or you could do the raise hand thing, which never seems to entirely work.
I was trying to raise my hand for a few, but I don't think it was working.
Who's speaking?
It's Danny.
Danny Marino.
Hi, all. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Also, I saw you trying to turn the lamp on it, and for me, I'm looking on my phone, and so I'm only seeing the 2 of you, and then just the shot of the window, and it's so dark there now. So I think it's really nice, this kind of bit of time while all of our lighting is staying exactly the same. My question was, and it starts with a comment, which was, who did the casting for this? I think, was it, I think both roles were quite properly cast in what one would expect from the undertones of the gender dynamics between the 2 of you also was quite apparent. And almost in the beginning, I found Sophie to be doing more teaching, and then that role quickly switched. And I'm curious to Sophie, as the parallel here to the audition, mm-hmm. Being quite strong. How did you really navigate? Because you yourself said, I think pretty clearly that he was a recitalist or a coach in that, but then also you kind of stepped in, and it very much felt like it was stepping into an audition, because you're asking what should be said, what should be done, what do you want to hear from me? Very quickly, a role of wanting to satisfy or wanting to get it done, or and my question to you is, did you feel that at any point it was the other way around? And maybe to Houman, in the beginning, did you feel that switch? Because I certainly did a few times.
I always came with the assumption that I was going to be coached through or taught something in an aria that I know, and that the conceit is that it's by somebody who is not specifically knowledgeable about my medium, but I always assumed that I was going to be a student. To a certain extent, there's the kind of brief switch of, let me tell you some context about this piece, and this is just the same thing that I would be doing if I were talking to anybody else, really. So yeah, at a donor event, to children, it's selling what I'm doing to a certain extent. So there's a teacherliness, but there's also, to a certain extent, I associate that very much with being a student as well, where I prove that I know what I'm talking about. All throughout conservatory, you have to introduce the piece that you're doing, and you're introducing it for people, or for your fellow classmates and the teacher who already knows this. So you're supposed to arrive and say, this is from this set, this is by this composer who represents this style, and you're not teaching the teacher anything. You're teaching maybe your classmates, but you're mostly proving that you did your research.
Have you had to do auditions on Zoom during this period?
A couple, yes.
Yeah. Did it feel parallel?
No, this felt more like when I've coached or done lessons. And in general, it felt very much more like a lesson or a masterclass than an audition. But I think what you're perceiving also about this feeling like an audition is that lessons kind of never stop feeling a little bit like an audition, and coachings and certainly master classes. You're always kind of showing your progress, the work you've done throughout the week or the month since you last saw a person. So there is a process of constantly re-auditioning for everybody who hears you every time you open your mouth.
And I'll add to that. I did the casting, but yeah, I think there's something there, Sophie, and also the presumption that Houman knew nothing, presumption that Houman knew nothing of your medium, but also like the presumption that you have to sort of prove yourself in both of those scenarios. Mm-hmm. I think is interesting to hear. The other thing I was going to say about the reason I said that I did the casting is that I actually I tried to avoid the word student, actually in sort of talking about this and leading up to it, to see if that would make a difference, in terms of also sort of letting go of the presumption that something is being handed over in the first place. That's, for me also, it felt a lot at many moments like Sophie was teaching Houman.
Well, I mean, it's normal. I have a certain mastery, but it could have been much more overt. It could have been, let me teach you about opera. Mm-hmm. I do this. I could have, welcome to my classroom. This is your voice lesson. You don't have to sing today, but this is how I sing. Why did I do a performance? I could have instead said, can you hear the difference when I sing this way? This could have been a masterclass on diction. It could have been a masterclass on technique. I could have been asking different questions about, can you hear how this changes my sound when I do this or when I do that? What kind of emotion do you hear when I do this? I took it for granted that I was going to do a performance. And in that case, that is always going to put me in a sort of privileged position, right? Because I'm on stage usually higher than people, but also I'm expecting some reception. And that always puts me to a certain extent also in a lower hierarchy, because I don't know how I'm going to be received. If I care, at least it will potentially lower my status. And I do care.
Thanks. Yeah, maybe we have time for one more question, maybe two, depending on.
I'll go ahead. I am sitting in a garden with a lot of birds that are intermittently screaming. Sometimes it's singing and sometimes it's screaming, but it's really loud and it's really unexpected every time. And there were moments where you were singing and when you guys overlapped, when you were singing and the birds were screaming, where my attention was more towards the birds and moments when my attention was more towards you. Because ultimately the thing that I look for as a voyeur, do you hear them? As a voyeur is surprise. And like, there was so much control for so much of that performance for both of you, for like so much control in Sophie and so much control in Houman, that like the birds kept pulling me away. And I think Houman, the same way that you said that Sophie used humor and the smile as a way to distance herself from and create some sort of defense with her audience. I felt like you were using your analysis as a defense. Like I expected you to be a little bit more surprising in moments as a teacher. Of song. I would expect teachers of song to sing, but I didn't hear you singing in any literal or metaphorical ways. That wasn't a question. You guys can.
No, but you, I mean, you wouldn't catch me singing in any case for public safety. But what is true about that is that, you know, the whole thing of like going to the story and going to the, that's why I said, oh, that was so bad. That was kind of that was such a safe mode. Like I understood it a couple of minutes after I had done it, and then it was too late. Then it was, we were going to move along a familiar line. Where it surprised me was, and I can't take in any way, I keep wanting to ask, how did you choose this aria, Sophie? Was that moment of the discovery of sort of the overlap between Sophie, the worker, and the page.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I had some stuff to sing with. Like there was some stuff there that was surprising to me, that surprised me. And there were moves that I could make. But yeah, other than, and that was just luck. Like this, that was luck. If you had, I really thought you might come in with something like much more like with like simple. I'm very curious. Why did you choose this one? I mean, it's perfect.
Because I think it represents me. Because I'm comfortable with it, and I'm comfortable with it because, again, I've been doing it for a lot. I knew that I could do it over and over again. I knew that I would be comfortable being vulnerable in it. And the reason why I constantly use it for auditions, apart from the fact that it shows off a lot of vocalism, is because when I'm nervous, it is me. I can basically be myself and do it.
Okay, you see, my kind of fantasy version of this was that Sophie would come in with something that she's having trouble with and she's working with. You see, so you're right, Madiha, in the playing it safe.
Yeah.
From both sides. At the same time, that's the thing that made it interesting for me. The fact that we were actually exploring a zone of safety, supposed safety, that is very unsafe. And supposed kind of a home that's really no home. Like nobody would dwell in that version of the page unless they have to. And as somebody who has to sing for his meal, I have a real understanding of this. You know, I do that too. I've got my version of that song. I just don't think anybody is gonna. Well, maybe somebody should invite me to bring that in and teach me something.
Well, we were talking about whether to bring something that I was very, very comfortable with, so that the base vocality would be no longer in contest, and that I could analyze any number of things. Or whether I should do something that I'm still very much a train wreck on. Because of course, there are many, many pieces that I don't know very well. I would have been maybe kind of trying to figure out the notes simultaneously. I wouldn't have been doing it from memory. And we were kind of wondering, which one do we go with? The one that I can be more receptive on. And so I'm definitely going to always be more, well, in some ways, no, I could be receptive on both, but what is the work? Is the work how I learn something or how I work on something? And that would be an interesting one to do as well.
Well, to many more times, I hope, in different versions, in different directions, in different domesticities of trust and distrust, and many different languages. Thank you both so much for your willingness, openness, your trust in me, in the little part that I did, and your trust in each other in developing a conversation around it too. So thank you, Houman Harouni, Sophie Delphis. Thank you everybody else for being here. Thank you to the birds if they're still there. And I hope to see you all in person or like this or both soon.
Do we have time for one more question or no? I don't know. That's being asked in the chat.
Leave it open for one more. I'm just trying to be mindful of, we could maybe another 5 minutes. Obviously anybody that needs to go.
Yeah, thanks so much. I have one question to each of you, both of you. So like to Houman, I think, well, the program says Sophie is going to teach you how to teach. And I think she did a great job. Like the moment you realize that you have crossed, went to a place you didn't want it to be. So I wonder what happened right after that. What happened within you when you realized that, oh, this is not what I wanted to do, and how do you keep that within you for the rest of the interaction you're with her? Was all of the conversation or action you did after that was to undo it, not to do it, or you relieve yourself from there and to go to another place? This is a question to Houman, and to Sophie. My question is, you mentioned that vulnerability and transparency, being transparent. But the fact here, or the power you have, is that Houman actually won't really tell if you are trying his approach or not. So when he is giving you a scenario, the text asks you to try a different way, he wouldn't, to be honest, I don't think any of us or he could say, oh, Sophie, you are trying. I see you're doing enough or not enough. So what was happening within you when you were trying, and do you really trying towards his direction? And if his power or this authority or whatever dimension was there as real, or just for the performance of this Zoom for today?
Wait, can we switch questions? Like Sophie answers my question and answers Sophie's question, because that's going to be a lot more.
You can.
I'm very curious about what Sophie thinks about my state of mind in that moment. I mean, my state of mind is pretty simple at that moment. It was pretty.
And I also don't want you to distance yourself with this, what you're wording. Yeah, making it fun, Houman. I don't want you to run away from my question.
I'm not trying to make it, I can tell you very, like, my side of it is pretty quick. Like, I caught myself in that situation, and then I said, oh fuck, nothing's gonna happen unless we work through this. And for the rest of the time, I try to. I don't want to say. I don't want to say. I want to know what. No, it's not a game. Like, it's real.
My answer is really, really fast too. I didn't notice. I didn't notice anything particularly shifting, and I think that means a lot about what I expected. I think I expected always a certain amount of needing to please. So I did not notice all of a sudden that you had entered into a more authoritative teacher position, because I think I had already cast you in it.
But when I made it explicit, what about then? What happened then?
I didn't notice. I did not notice a shift.
that's what it's like.
So I was already interacting with you, at least on my side, as if you had already shifted. I didn't notice anything.
What I mean was there a shift once I made that dynamic explicit and said, like, this is what's going on? I feel like this person.
Not that I noticed. No, not really. I didn't feel any different.
Cool.
And it was actually interesting to hear about it because I didn't realize that a shift had happened. And if I'm to answer my question, I actually disagree, or I assume that he would know if I weren't trying something, at least. Maybe not like absolutely exactly, because what does it mean? How does it look to be thinking about this or be thinking about that? But I was trying because I felt transparent. I felt that it would be clear if I weren't with it. And when, especially in the last iteration, when I was stopping, a couple of times I probably could have or should have stopped, and I just thought, okay, you know what? It doesn't matter, let's continue. But I wanted to stop because I didn't think I could get away with it.
So when you say trying, are you trying, I'm trying to imagine what that would be like with music. Is that you are using different techniques to translate what you are going to convey? And it might be dangerous in that use of techniques because they're gonna break a limitation or boundary as such. That when you, was that what happened? What was happening?
Mostly just mentality, mostly just changing character mentality, what I'm thinking, and then a little bit technique. I don't know if it's noticeable, but I noticed it in myself. My voice was a little bit more, just the slightest bit more tragic in the second iteration when I was doing a little bit more. I was thinking of it a little bit more as suffering, and there, just even on a vocally technical level, there were a couple more catches in the voice that are still technically sound, but it's more how I would sing a different aria. It's a little less light. I added a little bit more body. It changed to a certain extent how I was singing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can say something to answer that question. It was during the second singing where I noticed I was getting exactly what I had kind of, in a sense, asked for.
Mm-hmm.
And that it was, but I was getting it conceptually. I wasn't getting it artistically. So conceptually, I was getting like a tragic figure of the page who disdained, like, I saw you like do this with your face, kind of like this, I don't know, a snarl almost. And you know, the singing itself, I could feel, or maybe I'm reacting more to body language than singing because I can't tell. But and it was not at all what I wanted. I mean, I got what I wanted, what I'd asked for, but it wasn't what I wanted. What I wanted was working exactly like you said later, Sophie. This idea that it is me and I'm doing something, but there are constraints within which I need to operate. Meaning, like, the page, for example, to be true, can't come out there and be like snarling at these lords.
Right.
The page is going to have to deliver this in a different way. It has to be far more creative and therefore far more tragic than anything that we could come up with conceptually. And so at that point I realized I had failed. That was the moment I was like, oh crap, like somebody's following my instructions rather than my soul, which is a shared thing. It's not it wouldn't be my soul. It would, nobody can express my soul without their soul. They can, and therefore it's out of my control, like my soul usually is. And I did not feel free until you paused in the middle of the singing, and at that moment I was free. At that moment I was no longer in that dynamic. Especially the second time that you paused, and it was not the right time to pause. It was, and then I could rest.
You were free of your own relationship to your performance, Houman?
Not my relationship to my performance, in that something was being produced that was taking into account what I had said. So I wasn't talking to air, but it wasn't going after. It was not for that very reason putting me in the position of the. You said, what did you say? You said the repetitor. What was the name of
Editor, yeah.
repetitor? Like precisely, like almost like the dictator or like the repetitor. Like it was not putting me in that position.
And I wasn't a puppet.
Yes, and not because I care about. Let me make this clear. It's not, my problem is not that you would or would not be a puppet. My problem is that the music won't be good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, like at that moment, I thought like we were, there was hope for some kind of music in which I could one day be, like, in a tiny way represented, not as a dictator or repetitor, but as
Also having good music.
only.
Great.
Thank you so much for the time and for sharing your thought and for the beautiful everything.
Thank you for that last question. It was really, really wonderful. And thanks again to everyone. Signing off. Speak to you all soon.